Hello, and welcome to Meenah's Tirith, the podcast where we explore the Tolkien world and answer questions from you. My name is Meenah.
And this is Brian.
This is Season 2, Episode 3 of the podcast. Welcome back, listeners, and hello to those who are new. In today's episode, I will share my thoughts on the Rings of Power episodes 4, 5, and 6.
Cool. I feel so welcomed. So it's been a while since we did one of these, and you've been telling me that there are a lot of strange things happening with all of the rings, right? So what's been going on that I've obviously missed?
So, in these past 3 episodes, we've seen Galadriel go on a short quest under Elrond's leadership, and her ring talks to her. We also see that the 7 rings for the dwarves have been made, and King Durin is using one of them. And we also see that Annatar and Celebrimbor start to make the rings for men.
They're talking rings now? Okay, that's interesting. Since you're a Tolkien purist, does this match what you've read in the Tolkien books? And what do you think about these things?
There's a lot of differences between the Silmarillion and the show.
Okay.
First, in the show, the rings are made in this order. First, 3 for the elves, then 7 for the dwarves, and now 9 for men. Second, it appears that the smiths, Annatar, Celebrimbor, and the Eregion elves, intentionally created rings for elves, then for dwarves, then for men. Third, at the same time in the show, it feels like the rings for men were made in such a deceitful and manipulative way. This is not consistent with the books.
Hmm.
So, this is what happens in the book, The Silmarillion. First, it's clear why the rings were made, and it's very straightforward, not deceitful. They weren't made for military power or for fun or because Celebrimbor is so ambitious or because the elven tree in Linden was dying. They certainly weren't made because Annatar was manipulating them either. By the way, one YouTuber called Celebrimbor Brimby. Kind of funny.
Oh.
Anyway, according to Tolkien, the rings were made to bring back certain joys that the elves had in Valinor, the most perfect place where the gods reside. The rings would contain certain powers to help preserve the elven lands and make them as beautiful as Valinor. So when Annatar appeared, he offered to help the elves and give them gifts on how to make jewels. So at first, Brimby and the elves of Eregion created lesser rings, kind of like prototypes and for practice. We don't know how many these lesser rings, how many there are, or who has them, or what came of them. We just know that they practice. So after this practice round, the elves created 16 greater rings, not specific for a group or a race. In fact, all 16 of these rings were made very much similar to each other, and they were made under Annatar's direction and guidance. It was only later that Annatar took these rings from Celebrimbor by torture and force. Then Sauron gave the 7 of the 16 to the dwarves and 9 to the race of men for his evil purposes. Anyway, in Tolkien's The Silmarillion, after the 16 greater rings were made, Annatar left Eregion for some time. This is when Celebrimbor made the 3 rings for the elves. Celebrimbor used the knowledge he gained and learned from Annatar to create the 3 rings, but Annatar did not know they existed and did not have any part in physically making them. And only one of them actually contained mithril, the one Galadriel has. So, 16 were made first, then the 3 for the elves. The elves weren't deceived or manipulated into making them, they wanted to create rings of power.
Wow. That was a very lengthy uh, description. Okay. Do you need some water?
I'm okay.
Okay.
This is exciting.
Okay. Very interesting. I just assumed that there were rings made for each race, and now there's like a ton more rings. So, what were the effects of the rings, or were the effects of the rings the same?
Good question. Yes, the effects were similar to how the TV show and films portray it. of any of the 16 rings, if the race of men wore one of those rings, they would amass wealth and power, their life would be prolonged, they would be corrupted by the ring, and they would turn into invisible wraiths. If the dwarves wore any of those 16 rings, they wouldn't be able to be corrupted or controlled by the one ring, but it made the dwarves greedy and lust for wealth. So the dwarves were resistant to Sauron's control, but they could accumulate lots of treasures.
Okay, that seems to be in line with the show because that Durin dude, the king, right, the one with the white beard, was really getting greedy and trying to dig for more stuff, if I remember correctly. Um, Before the ring, he had restrictions on digging, right, and now he wants to remove those restrictions.
Right, yeah. And here's an interesting interpretation of the rings that the showrunners put in the show. The rings that were made by Celebrimbor alone for the elves.
You mean Brimby?
Yes,
Okay.
they don't have the same effect as the others that were made under Annatar's guidance. They are obviously made differently, meaning in episode 5, Galadriel freely gives her ring to Elrond and tells him to take it and save it. The ring has no power over her. But in episode 6, you can tell that King Durin was agitated when he forgot he took off his ring, and you can tell it's on his mind. And in episode 7, King Durin says, the ring is his, it belongs to him. So the ring is possessive. Kind of reminds you of how the One Ring had a hold over Bilbo and Frodo.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I can see that. It's like their precious ring, right? And so I guess does that mean that the three elven rings are free from Sauron's control?
The elven rings were made by elves alone, but they were used by the methods they learned from Annatar, and because the one ring is so much more powerful, the three elven rings are somehow subject to it. So I don't think the elven rings can be corrupted like the 16 can be, but there is one ring more powerful, so then all of them are probably subject to it in some way.
Hmm. Okay. So what about all those visions that the elven rings give and this talk about this unseen world that we kind of talked about last season?
The only ring that obviously had some gift of foresight is Vilya, the ring of air, the mightiest of the three, the ring that Gil-galad has and will eventually give to Elrond. That ring has a gift of foresight, or maybe it's a gift that Elrond naturally has, not sure. Tolkien didn't say that the Elven rings give you visions of the unseen world or that there is a gift of foresight. In fact, he didn't really talk about the unseen world at all. He wasn't obsessed with that world like the showrunners are. Anyway, I don't know if Tolkien meant for the elven rings to give you visions or not, but the one vision of Brimby dying is exactly how Tolkien described his death.
I really love how we're referring to Celebrimbor as Brimby. So let's talk about Brimby's apprentice, the one that turned invisible. And it looks like she saw a person full of flame, smelling of death. What are your thoughts on that? That's just weird.
So I don't think Tolkien's Rings of Power would have turned an elf invisible. Like I said before, the 16 rings were made very similarly. They weren't made for a specific race. So if a representative from the race of men wore any of the 16, that person would become invisible. If a dwarf wore any of the 16 rings, they would become greedy for treasure. The show makes it seem like becoming invisible is unique to one of the 9 rings, but I don't think that's what Tolkien meant. So I thought it was weird and inconsistent that the elf Merdania turned invisible.
Okay, that's another name I don't remember. Let's go to a new topic about the character Tom Bombadil. That's a question from one of our listeners. And from what you've told me, he's a character from Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, but the show takes place thousands of years before Tom makes an appearance in The Fellowship of the Ring. So what's up with that?
I actually liked how the show portrayed Tom Bombadil. In the book, he's like this merry fellow but nonsensical guy who lives in the old forest. He doesn't have a care in the world, loves nature, loves trees and animals, loves to sing songs, and is married to Goldberry. I'm kind of glad the Rings of Power version of the character isn't singing jolly songs or breaking into song randomly. He hums some songs, but it's not the main part of the scene, and I like that. I also like that the showrunners brought a real character from Tolkien's work, not some new elf like Arondir or a new Harfoot like Nori or a new enemy like Adar or a new Numenor person like the daughter of Elendil who is a disgrace to her family. Anyway, Tom is a real character that Tolkien created, and I like that he's in the show. A lot of the dialogue from episode 4 is actually directly from the Fellowship of the Rings.
But I'm really confused. Like, who is he? And also, everyone in Tolkien's world has a really strange fantasy like name, and this guy just has a name Tom. That's just doesn't feel like it quite belongs. Anyway, so how does he compare to the book?
Tom is someone who existed before the world was created, or so he says. He's the eldest, or oldest being on Middle Earth. He is fatherless. These are the same words Tolkien uses in The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. But you are young, and I am old. Eldest, that's what I am. Tom was here before the river and the trees. Tom remembers the first raindrop and the first acorn. So this is all similar to that scene in episode 4. I don't know if he was a Maya or a Valar guard. It doesn't seem so. Some people interpret Tom as Middle Earth personified. Whatever's the case, he's just a character who loves Middle Earth and who Frodo encounters on his journey to Imladris. Also, how the stranger meets Tom is very similar to how Frodo meets Tom in The Lord of the Rings. First, the stranger gets stuck in the tree Old Man Ironwood, and Tom has to rescue him out of it. Then Tom invites the stranger into his house and lets him have a bath, and they have a meal in front of a fire. This is exactly how Frodo and the hobbits meet Tom in the Old Forest. They get stuck in a tree, Old Man Willow. Then they are invited to Tom's house, they take baths, and have a meal in front of a fire.
Okay, so that brings us to why Tom is in the show. It appears that Tom is the person that the stranger was meant to find.
One reason why I think he's in the show is because the showrunners have rights to Tom Bombadil since it's in the Fellowship of the Ring.
Oh.
But also, I think they want to bring in some character that is ancient, older, who is part of Middle Earth, who can interact with the stranger. I thought I would not like the show's portrayal of Tom, but I actually liked it. It reminds me so much of the book.
I'm glad there's one thing you actually like about this show. Okay. All right. So, a different question from another listener is it looks like there's not just one Istar. Did I say that correctly? Okay. It looks like there's two. What are your thoughts on that? Is this Saruman and Gandalf?
I can't believe we're still talking about whether these two Istari are Saruman and Gandalf.
I can believe it.
In Tolkien's works, The Silmarillion and The Unfinished Tales, by Manwë's leadership, there were 5 Maiar in Valinor who formed a group called the Istari, or the Order of the Wizards. Karumo, also known as Saruman, was chosen by Aule. Then Orome chose Alatar, one of the Blue Wizards. Manwë, the leader of the Valar, chose Olorin, aka Gandalf. Olorin was the oldest and did not want to go to Middle-earth because he feared Sauron, so Manwë urged him that that was all the more reason to go to Middle-earth. Then Yavanna, the wife of Ali, begged Kurumo to take Iwendil, aka Radagast, and Alatar took Palando as his friend. So then there were 5 Istari. In some writings, it says that Alatar and Palando, the Blue Wizards, went early to Middle Earth in the Second Age, and they went east to Rhûn. Nothing is known about what they did. Then Karumo, Iwendil, and Olorin came to Middle Earth. Regardless of the order of arrival, they all cloaked themselves as old wise men, subject to the worries of this world like hunger, fear, pain, and tiredness, but they never aged more. They were not to reveal their true forms or use power. Their mission was to reassure and aid the free peoples of Middle Earth that the Valar in the West had not abandoned them, but they were guiding them against the Dark Lord. In the end, only one of them remained true to their mission, Gandalf. You could say that Radagast did remain faithful to his mission because Yavanna gave him the mission to care for all the birds and beasts and plants. But Gandalf was most faithful to the order and to the mission against the enemy.
I lost you after about like two sentences, but that's cool. I hope everyone else listening to this actually followed you. So, all right. So what do you think? So who do you think the Dark Wizard and the Stranger is? Is it Alatar, Palando? Uh, why not Gandalf and Saruman?
So I really think that it is Alatar and Palando. Even though Tolkien says they went as friends, maybe they got into a fight before arriving to Middle Earth. That's why the Dark Wizard is trying to catch the stranger. Drama, but I don't know. I don't think it's Saruman and Gandalf because they came to Middle Earth with good intentions and with the mission in mind. After Saruman arrives in Middle Earth, he is known to Elrond, Galadriel, and others as someone who is working against Sauron. He is the leader of the Istari, and it's during this time in the Third Age, as he researches more about Sauron and the Rings of Power, that he gets trapped by Sauron, turns to evil, and starts working for Sauron. I don't think it's Gandalf either because this stranger doesn't have the ring of fire Nenya. In the books, it says that once Gandalf reaches Middle Earth, he is given the ring of fire. So he has it for pretty much the entire time he's been on Middle Earth.
Do you have a different theory about this?
Yeah, so here's another theory. It's possible that the Dark Wizard is Saruman in disguise and he has already become evil. Tolkien did mention somewhere that in some version of the story that Saruman went east to Rhûn with Alatar and Palando, but only Saruman returned west in Middle Earth. What happened to the other two, Tolkien doesn't say. So it could be Saruman's early days, maybe. But I can see why people still think the stranger is Gandalf. Here are the reasons. One, he has a great cloak. Two, he bonds with the Harfoots, who are the ancestors of the hobbits, just like how Gandalf has a fondness for the halflings. Three, he has some connection with fire, although again, I think that Gandalf's connection with fire is due to the Ring of Fire, and right now the stranger does not have that ring. Nowhere in Tolkien's works does it say that Olorin is a guy of fire before he arrives in Middle Earth. Anyway, 4, the stranger said, when in doubt, follow your nose at the end of season 1, just like when Gandalf said that in the Lord of the Rings films. It's the same exact quote. 5, in episode 4, the stranger talks about his task with Tom Bombadil. If you've read the books, Gandalf uses the word task to describe why he is in Middle Earth. And in the movie The Two Towers, he says that he was brought back to life after fighting the Balrog because his task was not yet finished. Reason number 6. In episode 6, Tom tells the stranger that he will find his staff when he is single to the service of the secret fire, which Gandalf also says in the Fellowship of the Ring film and book when he battles the Balrog. Gandalf says, I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the flame of Arnor. Gandalf was a servant of the secret fire, and it seems like the stranger is on that path as well. 7, Tom gives the stranger a quote: Many that die deserve life, some that live deserve death. And this is the same exact line that Gandalf says to Frodo in Peter Jackson's films in a flashback to Moria. So I can see why people think it's Gandalf.
Wow. I think you just gave like 10 reasons why it is Gandalf, and you're still not convinced. Oh, I mean, wow. Okay. Why don't you okay. So it feels like it's pretty clear that the stranger is Gandalf, and they talk about this secret fire. Isn't there some sort of power that Gandalf has here?
Right. So this is a misunderstanding. It's not, the secret fire isn't some kind of fire power. The secret fire in the Silmarillion, um, so no, this is a misunderstanding. The secret fire isn't some fire power. In the Silmarillion, Eru or Iluvatar, who is God in Tolkien's world, he sent the secret fire to burn at the heart of the world. The secret fire is life. So when Gandalf says he is a servant of the secret fire, he is saying that he is a servant of God. And the God in Tolkien's world is Eru or Iluvatar. And when Tom talks about the secret fire with the stranger, he is also saying the same thing. They're not talking about some like super fire power. Tolkien also calls it the flame imperishable.
Okay, so this is getting pretty deep into Tolkien's world. So besides this fire, doesn't everything else point to the stranger being Gandalf? I mean, you just gave like 10 reasons, right? And all of those quotes and words being used are the same.
Right, but no, I don't think he's Gandalf. The Istari have the same mission. So, of course, they're all servants of the secret fire of Eru Iluvatar. It doesn't matter if Gandalf says that or another Istar. It's true that for all five of them, they are servants of the secret fire. Similarly, they all have the same task. It isn't just Gandalf's task, it's all of them. Also, it sounds like Tom met the Dark Wizard and now he's meeting the stranger. And I know that in the books, Tom and Gandalf are friends. Maybe all the Istari meet Tom. Just because the stranger meets Tom doesn't mean he's Gandalf. And lastly, the stranger has some connection with fire, but he doesn't have the ring of fire. Gandalf's ties to fire is through Narya, the ring of fire. He isn't one of the Maya of fire or flame. He spent a lot of time learning about pity and compassion.
Hmm.
So I get that there's a lot of hints to Gandalf, but I think these hints show that the stranger is a person of good, not bad. They are showing that, like Gandalf, there was another Istar who stayed true to their mission. Because right now, the stranger hasn't done anything significant. Is he on Sauron's side? Is he on the side of the elves? We don't know, but these little hints show that he's similar to Gandalf, another Istar who is staying true to the mission. And the Dark Wizard, he might be another Istar who turned evil, who wants to support Sauron. Maybe he's Saruman the Younger. Who knows?
Hmm. Okay. Well, let's come back to Tom at some point. So let's move on to the Numenor world. We saw Elendil get beaten up and his friend die. We see him being judged by Ar-Pharazon, right?
Mhm.
Okay. And we see him get thrown into prison and he's going to be offered up to like this ancient sea creature.
What happens in the book is that Muriel truly is the rightful heir, but Ar-Pharazon does gain power. He marries Muriel, and Ar-Pharazon does become king. He is power hungry, and the throne is not enough. And you kind of see that in the past episodes that Ar-Pharazon is wondering how he can be immortal and how to have the power like the Valar. This contributes to Numenor's downfall. Eru Iluvatar gave the race of men a gift, the gift of death. They are not bound to Middle Earth forever until the world is changed, like the Eldar, the Maiar, and the Valar are. Many kings accepted this gift and embraced it, but Ar-Pharazon is not one of them. So all of these scenes in these past three episodes help to build Elendil's character. They're all made up, by the way, but we see his values and his beliefs through his actions and his words. He is one of the faithful to the Valar, and this becomes important because it's part of why Elendil and Isildur don't perish under the Great Wave. What you don't see in the show is that Elendil has royal blood in him. He is a descendant of one of the faithful lines of the throne, so he was brought up well.
Hmm. Yeah, I think some of our friends really appreciated those scenes with Elendil, and it sounds like he was a valiant person, right? This is all great and all, but where is Isildur?
Maybe he's still talking to the female Ents, or maybe he's in a corner crying because the girl he likes is actually betrothed. I have no idea.
Wait, Ents or ants?
Ents.
Like ENTS?
That's right.
Yeah.
All these scenes are made up. But I think that Isildur should be reunited with his father soon because the story of Numenor is far from being over. Sauron is supposed to be brought to Numenor as a prisoner, where he gives lies to Ar-Pharazon and deceives him, and then Ar-Pharazon sets sail to the Undying Lands. We will have to see Isildur rescue a fruit of the White Tree, which is later the Tree of Aragorn, because Ar-Pharazon cuts it down. And Elendil and Isildur also have to build ships and be ready when the great wave comes. Also, off topic comment. I like how Numenor's palace looks like Meenah's Tirith, the city of the king in Gondor.
Oh, like the name of this podcast.
That's right.
Okay. How about we talk about orcs or Uruk? Right. Did I say that right?
Mm-hmm.
Uruk. Uruk. That word is still hard to say. It looks like Adar is marching towards Eriador to start a battle. What's up with that?
Yes, I don't like this battle at all because it's led by Adar. In Tolkien's world, Sauron comes to Eregion, tortures Celebrimbor, and gives him the ring.
I mean, Brimby.
Yes, tortures Brimby to give him the rings of power and starts a battle. Adar doesn't exist. The 13 elves who were put into Morgoth's service, that is something the showrunners made up for this series as well. Also, I don't like how Brimby is deceived and manipulated into creating the rings of power. I don't think that's what Tolkien wanted. I mean, I don't know Tolkien personally, but according to what I've read, I think that the elves are smart beings. They truly wanted to create something good for Middle Earth. I think that Tolkien meant Brimby to intentionally create rings in a precise, thoughtful, hardworking, and delicate way. It's Sauron who takes them and uses them for evil. Also, was it just me, or did others notice that Adar is played by a different actor? He looked a little different from the guy from season 1.
I'll let someone else respond to that because I was probably sleeping. But he's an Uruk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, also to be fair, all of the Uruks look like the same to me, so I can't tell.
Yeah, apparently the first season's actor wanted to continue playing new roles in other new worlds.
I mean, outside of Lord of the Rings?
That's right.
Okay, so he's not in these episodes.
Nope.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, that happens. Anyway, so we have what, 2 more episodes left of the season? Do you have any other hot takes or predictions?
In season 1, Galadriel talked about her husband, Celeborn. I hope we get to meet him before the season ends. Second, considering how quickly these rings of power were forged and made, I hope that we get to see Sauron make the one ring to rule them all. Third, maybe we'll see the wedding between Ar-Pharazon and Miriel. Fourth, Adar has to die soon so that Sauron is the main evil enemy. Brian, do you have any predictions?
Not really, but I'll try to stay awake during the next few episodes if possible.
And more importantly, we'll get to meet the Balrog and how it destroys Khazad-dûm. Well, that's all we have for this episode of my podcast. We hope this helped you look into the world of Middle-earth and better understand the Rings of Power.
If you're enjoying this podcast, go ahead and subscribe, leave a rating and a review depending on whatever platform you are listening to this on.
If you have any questions for us to answer, please DM me or leave a comment on my Instagram at Meenah's_Tirith. Thanks for joining us. Namarie.